and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Right View. Before we get started tonight, let's take a look together at some videos and see what's going on out there. Here we go.
Thank you very much. As you see, even in our freshman class, we have tremendous leadership in this fight for saving the planet for the children. So I want to thank all of the groups that are here saying that climate can't wait. I see some other Reformed Jews for Climate Justice. This is a religious issue. Protect people, not polluters. Protect people, not polluters.
First of all, bless her heart, Nancy. I mean, she's done. She's done. Cooked, done, out of here. I guess she's trying to stay relevant, but it was not working out. That weather was not promising, and it was not helping her out. Hair blowing all over the place. What is she talking about? Climate change? Are we still beating this drum, Nancy? I mean, you guys have tried this for a long time. We just figured it out the other day that all of it has been nonsense. I mean, many of us knew, but obviously, you know, you guys have tried. It's not working. We know that climate change is not real. And if you really are that concerned about it, maybe you should take your press conference there for the tens of people who watched it over to China, over to India. Those are the biggest polluters on the planet, and yet nobody does anything about it. Keep beating that drum. How's it been working out for you? Just somebody should have given her a hat or like something to hold the hair back. It was not working out, but bless her heart for trying. Here we go.
And conservative critics in the UK are alleging a systemic left-wing bias at the BBC. What does all of this mean for the BBC's international reporting and its reputation?
Right. Three things are going on simultaneously. You have this actual journalistic scandal about a bad edit, a big mistake, but in a small part of a big documentary.
Brian Stelter with the hard-hitting info there. No, it's not a small edit, Brian. It completely changed the way that entire thing was received by anyone who watched it. What he's referencing there, for anyone who's wondering, is President Trump speaking at the Ellipse on January 6, 2021, just an hour or so before the whole situation went down at the Capitol, which everyone would like you to believe on the left and in the mainstream media was known as an insurrection. The problem is that the BBC, in putting together this documentary, edited it so heavily that it made the president look like he was saying that he wanted everybody to go down and attack the Capitol. When in fact, what he said, Brian, maybe you want to share this with your, again, tens of viewers there at CNN, is that he said, we're going to march down to the Capitol and make our voices peacefully and patriotically heard. Does that sound like an insurrection to anybody? Does that sound like a charge to go in and break into the Capitol? No, of course it doesn't. But they don't care about that. That was a huge deal. Brian knows it. All these people know it. They're trying to downplay it because it's so obvious now on the other side of all of this, what was going on. Nobody ever cared about getting real information out to the people. They started doing this to Donald Trump from the very beginning. Remember the Charlottesville hoax? Remember that whenever there was the issue in Charlottesville, and I talk about this all the time because it absolutely drove me crazy, where Donald Trump said there were very fine people on both sides, meaning the people who wanted to preserve history and the statue and the people who felt like they didn't want it anymore. And that's the only clip you got. But that's not what the media insinuated. They showed pictures of neo-Nazis and white nationalists and said Donald Trump thinks these are very fine people. If you play the full clip, he said there were very fine people on both sides, except the neo-Nazis and white nationalists who should be condemned totally. But see, when you edit stuff selectively in order to further your narrative instead of allowing the people who are viewing it to come up with their own conclusion, you are doing the bidding of the Democrats, and you are doing something that is absolutely disgraceful and disgusting and has zero journalistic integrity whatsoever. Brian knows that, but he's got to play his part. Here we go. Next one.
I don't know why Charlie Kirk was shot. Candace Owens says Charlie Kirk was shot because he was about to disavow Israel. Okay? I don't know why Charlie Kirk was shot, but I do know this. It's only served one group of people, Charlie Kirk's death. MAGA. They have taken this, they have wrapped themselves in it, they have righteous indignation, and they are able to say it's all, and by the way, all of the data shows that I think 85% of all political violence has occurred has been initiated by right-wing extremists.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Hunter Biden, are you kidding me? 85%. Where did you get that number? I've never heard something crazier in my entire life. And how dare you try to tell us that we have righteous indignation? No, we're pissed off because guess what? In cold blood, someone murdered our friend because the entire world had to watch while someone shot him in the neck. That was absolutely unacceptable, period. And you want to know why? You want to know why that happened? You want to know who to point the finger at? Well, whenever you try to say that someone is a Nazi, whenever you try to say that someone is akin to Hitler, when they are a racist, when they are a misogynist, it elicits a certain response from some people. So to continue to use that sort of, description when you talk about somebody, what do you think is going to happen? Why don't you go back and take a look at how Charlie was described? Why don't you take a look at how Donald Trump was described? Ironic, they both had people shoot at them. Sadly, one of them is no longer here. That was disgusting. And that is a completely ridiculous statistic. When have you seen violence from the right? I'll wait. Antifa? Who claims them? Not the right. Who burned down police precincts and, small businesses during the 2020 Summer of Love riots? Was that people on the right? I don't think so. You have not seen that. Who said if you see anybody from that administration at a gasoline station, you get up in their face, you push back on them, you let them know they're not welcome? That was Maxine Waters. Does she have a D or an R behind her name, Hunter? That's what I thought. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And you know what? Not that he has much of a platform, not that anyone really cares what Hunter Biden has to say, but you should be better than that. You should know better than that. You should be better than that. That was disgusting.
The science of gender. How many genders are there? How many genders are there?
Different people have different beliefs on that.
Well, you can believe all you want, but science says there's two. Why are we putting it in the curriculum to educate our children about that? What's the reason behind that?
The reason behind it is that we find that children who are gender diverse are being harassed, bullied in school.
This is the problem with the American education system. That woman is trying to validate teaching our kids something that's false. There are two genders. There's male and female. Period. End of story. The fact that that person has any bearing on anything that is taught in a school should absolutely blow your mind and should be completely unacceptable in the United States of America. Okay? There are two genders, and teaching our kids anything other than that is a lie. You know, we've got to get back to basics. We've got to get back to people who actually care about our kids. I mean, maybe we need to start paying our teachers more, but let's be able to fire the bad ones. Let's make sure there's no school superintendents or people who determine the curricula of our kids, you know, who have crazy ideas like this, who have a pause of 8 seconds before they answer the question as to how many genders there are and then come up with, it depends who you ask. No, it's basics. It's science. This is why Donald Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education. This is why he wants to ensure school choice, because no parent should have to send their kid to the school that lady is in charge of, okay? Should never happen in the United States of America. And quite frankly, she should not have a job anymore it took her that long, although maybe we shouldn't be surprised because we have a Supreme Court justice who can't define what a woman is. But I digress. Tonight, we are joined by the editor-in-large for Washington Times, Alex Swoyer, as well as the Daily Caller's Reagan Reese. Alex and Reagan, thank you so much for joining us. Shutdown is over. You know, we were happy to see that end, of course. Longest in history, Reagan, 43 days that we saw that. People, of course, are saying that this is the Schumer shutdown, and I agree with that. Chuck Schumer gave the directive not to work with the Republicans. Of course, 8 Democrats finally came to their senses and realized how awful what they were doing was for the entire country. But it's amazing because I just want to, as I'm going through and reading, like, article after article about how the Democrats are just falling apart at the seams, which is 100% accurate. It's interesting to get the take of the American people. So a lot of times, Reagan, I'll go to the comment section of different articles and I read people's thoughts on things. Listen to this. This comment: the sad part is that the Democrats held American citizens hostage for over 40 days for what they could have gotten on day one, a promise to hold a vote for the subsidies that taxpayers have to pay to make Affordable Care Act actually affordable. Isn't that ironic? And that vote will go in the loss column for the Democrats. So a lot of people on the other side of this shutdown are realizing the Democrats were at fault. Of course, they voted every time to keep the government shut down, not to fund the government. People are realizing that it actually hurt this country. And a survey with swing voters in Georgia showed that the Democrats came out on the losing end of this, that the people who looked at this, who were swing voters, meaning sometimes they vote Democrat, sometimes they vote Republican, squarely pinned this on the back of Democrats. How do you think long-term this is all going to play out for the Democrats? There's really no win. They have to take the loss on this, Reagan, right?
Well, first of all, it is a fact that the Democrats kept the government shut down. They were the ones who needed to come to the table to vote to reopen the government. That's why I was kind of surprised when the day after the election, we heard from President Trump and we heard him say that he thought the shutdown hurt Republicans at the ballot box, because you read all those comments, you read all those statistics, and I have anecdotal experience speaking to some friends who are normal Americans who are in the middle of America and you know, could vote down the middle either way each election, who are calling Democratic senators telling them to please open the government because they were so mad and knew it was their fault. Ultimately, yes, I think what this does to Democrats is they were riding high on election day. They thought, hey, we are back. Look at us. We're not in disarray anymore. We are winning. Republicans thought they were going to pound us. They didn't. Blue wave. And then they all break on the shutdown. They disagree. They're again go into this civil war. They're now fighting again, and they're back in disarray. So it was really almost comical here in Washington to watch Democrats be just gloating, so excited to win after the elections, and then go back to this situation where now they're fighting again. And ultimately, I think the biggest long-term impacts this will have on Democrats is that they still don't have an identity as a party. They still don't have a leader. They still don't have a direction. Do I think that Americans come in the 2026 midterms will be voting go to the ballot box with this shutdown on their mind and say, yes, the Democrats shut down the government, I'm going to vote for a GOP candidate? Probably not. I think they're going to be more worried about the economy, border issues, etc. But I do think for now, this really damages Democrats and their identity as a party.
Yeah, it certainly hurts them even further. Alex, I would say that if you lived in Northern Virginia, which I think part of the calculus on this for the Democrats was, let's keep the government shut down until we have these elections in blue states and in a blue city. I mean, it's kind of crazy that they were that concerned about these elections, these off-year elections, but we know they were. And I assume that a lot of the reason that they wanted to continue to do this is because look how many federal workers probably are in the Northern Virginia area. Virginia, of course, was one of those states, and they got the win there. And then they, crazy how all of a sudden, then they decided they were going to reopen the government. But it wasn't at no cost to the country, right? We certainly felt the impact. If you tried to travel via air travel over the course of the past 2 months, You felt it. Kevin Hassett, the National Economic Council director, said that the shutdown cost our economy here in the country about $15 billion per week, Alex, that it was shut down, and it's expected to knock 1 to 1.5% off of GDP for the fourth quarter. That's something I don't think people are talking about. It does have consequences that go farther and expand out past just the federal government. It's also estimated that 60,000 Americans who are not government workers, Alex, were cut from their jobs and lost their jobs because of the reduced economic output that we had in America. So, I mean, look, I agree with what Reagan said. I think it's going to be hard for Americans to look back on this shutdown a year from now and say, like, oh, remember when the Democrats did this and they didn't care about America? It's our job, though, to remind people of this information, to remind the 60,000 people who over the course of 43 days lost their jobs. You lost your job because the Democrats were playing politics instead of doing what was best for America.
Everything's frozen.
Uh-oh. Everything's frozen.
Laura, I think you went out for a second, but basically what I was going to highlight, some of the stuff I did get to hear was about the economic impact that the Democrats suffered or caused the country to face. I think it was $15 billion, you said. The other aspect of that, of what I noticed, was that I don't think we're going to have unemployment numbers. Was that correct? For that month, the month of October. There's obvious data that the government needs to rely on, that the administration needs to rely on to be able to properly serve the American people, that because of what the Democrats did, that they will be deprived of. I think also on the same note, y'all were talking about the election before my internet glitched there, and I have to say, I was not necessarily surprised when you mentioned Virginia. There's been one time, I think in the past 50 years, where a governor from the same party of the president was elected. So it would have been a huge feat for Republicans to be able to grasp Virginia. So although I think it was a great talking point Democrats wanted to use, they wanted to talk about healthcare, they wanted to talk about the shutdown, it would have been major had a Republican, Winsome Sears, won that seat. So I'm not really sure, if the whole election was so surprising for anyone, other than the fact that it's predictable the Democrats were trying to use it as a talking point. The one major thing I think we can also take from this is that we can't trust polling, which shouldn't be breaking news to anyone here. But one of the things I saw was that Axios had some sort of survey and study where 7 out of, I believe it was 13 swing voters blamed Democrats for the shutdown. If you looked at public polling during the shutdown, it was telling you overwhelmingly voters blamed Republicans. And it was right around November 7th, there was a YouGov analysis of their polling, and it showed that that was starting to shift, that blame was starting to shift away from Republicans. And I think that's why, you saw the outcome we did.
Well, Reagan, what do you think about the idea that, I know you said, and kind of as I was saying with Alex a second ago, it's going to be hard to pinpoint this sort of section of our history with the shutdown and the pain that was inflicted on so many people to next year during these midterms. But I think if we remind the people, the 60,000 people who lost their jobs, if we continue to talk about the impact that it's had, I mean, look, I'm sure the Democrats love to hear that they've knocked a couple points off of our gross domestic product because they, of course, hate Donald Trump more than they love America, and they're willing to have bad things happen to this country just to spite Donald Trump. But if we are able to bring that back up and remind people, maybe it helps us out. I don't know. I'll tell you who needs a lot of help is Chuck Schumer. To me, there is this changing of the guard that has happened in the Democrat Party, and it was sort of apparent that things were moving in this direction. A lot of us tried to call it out, that they were moving farther and farther left, that the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders of the world were sort of the new face of the party, that the old establishment, like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, they're done. They're done with these people. And now you have at least 9 Democrats who want for Chuck Schumer to relinquish his minority leader title and step down because they're saying he can't lead. He did a horrible job with this shutdown and his quote-unquote leadership. It really does feel like this is sort of the next step that they're taking to say, okay, out with the old. Let's bring in the new, Mom Donnies. Let's bring in all of the socialists and the communists because this is the new party. What do you think?
Well, the Democrats certainly need some energy. I'm very surprised in the direction they've gone since the election, the presidential election, that is. We saw almost every area of the country shift to the right. So that the fact that the party has embraced further left politicians has surprised me. And, maybe I'm going to be wrong that this is a misstep by them, but that's definitely something to consider and watch out for. When talking to GOP consultants, strategists in the White House on how you capitalize on Democrats being in disarray and Republicans really having a great time with the president in office, everyone you speak to will say that this time, this Trump administration feels different. It is orderly, it is strategic, they are getting things done. And so it's a known fact that angry voters are more motivated in the polls than happy voters. So how do you get the GOP, that Trump base, out to the polls? And there are two things that all of these sources I've talked to have pointed to. It's the economy, and it's also this message of saying, we have more to do. Send us back, let us get things done for another 2 years. And I think the shutdown can be a key part of that message. You can say, look at what Democrats did to the country. Look at how they shut down the country. Look at all the hurt that they waged on Americans. This is what you could experience for another 2 years if you don't vote Republicans back into office. That feeling of winning, that golden age, it's going to go away if you aren't motivated to go to the polls. So that's really the struggle right now. And I think the GOP can be strong, but also be in a difficult messaging situation because, Joe Biden is getting further and further away. There's only so much you can pin on Joe Biden. That shutdown is, again, going to be in the back of voters' minds. And so being able to effectively frame this party as far left and destructive to the country is definitely something that Republicans are going to have to be clever and witty about doing.
I think we also need to remind people as we head towards those midterms, Alex, that it is most likely, and President Trump predicted this, that if you give Democrats, the majority and they're able to, they are going to eliminate the filibuster. He talked about this during the course of the shutdown, that he wanted the Republicans to be the ones to end it and actually reopen the government with it. And then, of course, be able to get a lot done legislatively over the course of his time as president. We didn't see that happen because you had enough Democrats come over ultimately to vote with Republicans to get things back up and running. However, it is a scary prospect. And whenever you look at how extreme and far left some of these Democrats have become, and that's sort of feeling like the base of their party more than kind of an anomaly and fringe at this point, it's more standard that that's who they are as a party, especially if you look at New York City, especially if you look out west to Seattle. This is sort of who they're becoming as a party. So one of the messaging points that perhaps Republicans want to consider as we're heading into the midterms next year would be something along the lines of, hey, let's make sure they don't win the House and the Senate back, because you are probably going to see them eliminate the filibuster, and that means Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. states. That means packing the Supreme Court. That means in perpetuity, Democrats setting themselves up to win every presidential election from here on out. That is what they want to see happen. That's what they're banking on. That might be some good, talking point and messaging from the GOP headed to next year's midterms. Alex, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I covered the Senate, and it's often looked at as this, the cooling, where they go to cool down, right? The House has so much energy. They're closer to the people. There's so many of them. They have a majority vote. When it comes to the Senate, that 60-vote threshold is what they say keeps things bipartisan, allows sometimes for cooling minds. I think you're exactly right that if we don't keep the filibuster and that we let the left take it over and have, I don't want to even say a leader AOC someday, dear God, but we would see the filibuster go. And they did it first with judges. They got rid of the filibuster for judicial nominees. And it's always the Republicans having to play catch up. So I think that messaging is spot on. And I think that it's something that President Trump, and he needs to echo to everyone down ballot, that they need to make sure that they are communicating. Because what you said about Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, those would be 4 extra seats. That would be some mountain for the Republicans to be able to climb to claw anything back. And also to Reagan's point, I agree. The popular vote showed that the country is not moving the direction that the Democratic Party has gone. We talked about the November election, New York, Virginia, New Jersey, but I think really, Mamdani, that win was actually a Republican win, because right now he seems to be the Democrat that we can point to for saying that he's the leader of the party.
Yep.
He seems to be the most energetic. He seems to have the most support. And I mean, I think the average American would find that terrifying.
Well, they should, because it's going to be, I'll tell you what, we're going to get a front row seat to just how bad things are going to get and why socialism doesn't work, Reagan, that's for sure. Here's how you know that the Democrats really have nothing to offer the American people. They're going back to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. So let's talk about it very quickly. The president has finally said that he wants the Republican House to release all of the Epstein files, that they need to vote on that and make it happen. And it's funny because whenever this bubbles back up, because it kind of goes in phases, the Democrats and the mainstream media love this story because they somehow, Reagan, think that it makes Donald Trump look bad. They think that somehow this is going to cause a big rift within the MAGA base and the Republican Party. Overall, the problem that they're having is that, unfortunately for them, there's really been nothing to show that would connect Donald Trump to anything, so they're trying to manufacture stuff. Here's what the president said. He urged the party to get back on point, listing issues such as inflation, affordability, border security, the economy, and cultural policies, which he said were more important to voters. I'm going to say that's correct. Do you think the average person in America really cares about Jeffrey Epstein's emails and all that? But okay. He said, let's start talking about the Republican Party's record-setting achievements and not fall into the Epstein trap. And it is a bit of a trap because you're never going to be able to convince everyone of anything unless you release it all, which he wants to have happen. Now, the Democrats, Reagan, have had access to these files and all of this information. Don't forget, there was a time when, as we just noted, Joe Biden was in the White House where they had control of, the Congress, and they had the ability to get all this information out there for years. So why are they waiting until now? And why is it that now is when they're honing in on it so heavily? You had Virginia Giuffre, I don't know how to say her name, who said under oath in court that Donald Trump did nothing wrong, that she knew him and that she, had positive things to say about him, but did not have anything to do with any of this horrible and disgusting stuff that was going on. And isn't it interesting that her name was the one redacted in these emails that they floated out there? So it's very clear that this is a bit of a distraction, as the president notes, and he's saying, look, let's get this stuff out there, let's show it to everybody, and then let's move on, because that is exactly the goal of this from the Democrats and the mainstream media standpoint. We want a distraction because the Democrats have nothing else to offer, pretty clearly, Reagan. Right now in Ukraine, elderly Jews are trapped in unbearable poverty. Galina is a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor who has spent her entire life in the same village. She's sick, alone, and facing another bitterly cold winter. Today, like every day, she must decide whether to spend what little money she has on food, medication, or heating. No one should have to live like this. But for Galina and so many others, this is the harsh reality. Through the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and your generous donations, you can bring hope to those in need. Your gift of just $25 will help provide a food box packed full of life-saving essentials that will help feed someone struggling to survive. Don't delay. Your gift today will help provide the life-saving food and hope that Galina and so many like her so desperately need. Visit urgentifcj.org. That's one word, urgentifcj.org, or call 866-338-IFCJ. That's 866-338-4325. MyPillow is excited to announce they're having their biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back-in-stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. MyPillow bed sheets only $29.88, any color, any style, and any size, even kings. The regular price is $119.98. Now they're only $29.88. And once they're gone for good. My towels are finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regularly priced at $69.98. Now only $39.98. And for the first and only time, get their limited edition premium My Pillows made with Giza cotton and a designer gusset. Queens $17.98, Kings only $19.98. Also, for a limited time, when your order is over $100, you get free shipping plus $100 in free digital gifts. So go to mypillow.com or call 800-839-8506 and use promo code TRUMP. Use your promo code for the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now. That's promo code TRUMP.
Well, I think the initial handling of the Epstein files investigation was unfortunate, and I think that it created some anger within the president's base, rightfully so. And then what we saw was the mainstream media and the Democrats see this moment of, oh, the president's base isn't super happy with the administration because they said they would release the files. There were social media influencers at the White House. Then a memo gets sent out that actually there's no files. They're in disarray. Let's capitalize on that. And instead, I think they played right into the president's hand because they played right into this fake news. The Democrats are just looking and grasping at straws, trying to find something to implicate President Trump. And President Trump has been able to use that in his administration to say, isn't this ridiculous? And get his base back on track and unified that the Epstein stuff is, quote unquote, what he says is a hoax. And so I think that is what we've seen play out over these last 6 months. I think, again, the initial handling was unfortunate, but now it's been something that the president hopefully has been able to use to his advantage.
It's amazing, though, because we know that they have thrown, Alex, everything they possibly could at Donald Trump. I mean, let's go back over the past 4 years and think about all of the things. You had 2 impeachments, of course, over while he was in office. Then you had indictment after indictment. They wanted to put him in jail and in prison for the rest of his life and then some if they could. There have been assassination attempts against him. They have done everything possible to try and damage Donald Trump, his reputation, and keep him out of that White House. Does anyone out there believe that if they had anything with these Jeffrey Epstein emails or any information that would tie Donald Trump directly to having partaken in any of this, they wouldn't have already used it? I mean, no one believes that. They had to make up that Mar-a-Lago's worth $18 million. Are you freaking kidding me? It's enough. Here we go. In her 2025 memoir, Nobody's Girl, Gouffre, I guess that's how you say her name, revealed that her father was a maintenance worker at Mar-a-Lago in 2000 and got her a job as a locker room attendant. She wrote, Trump couldn't have been friendlier, telling me it was fantastic that I was there. Do you like kids, he asked. Do you babysit at all? He explained that he owned several houses next to the resort that he lent to his friends, many of whom had children who needed tending. Gouffre never accused Trump of wrongdoing, either in her book or in court. Here's the kicker. She died by suicide on April 25th, 2025, at her farm in Western Australia. Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yes. It is. And also, to your point earlier, that her name was the one redacted by, we believe, Democrats, because she had previously said nothing inappropriate ever happened. Also, to your point, I think the biggest one, I wrote the book about lawless lawfare during the 2024 election. You brought up the indictments. I think it was May, June, July, August, 4 indictments in 4 months against your father-in-law. 100%. Anyone with a brain knows if the Biden DOJ had anything connecting President Trump to Epstein, we would have seen it well before November's election. And we did not. So that's just, I think that's number one, anyone with common sense. 2, as a lawyer, I think that I'm happy to see that Pam Bondi has appointed a U.S. attorney to look into some of this, because I think some of the biggest crux of what's happened with this Epstein story, it dates back to the early 2000s when his original plea deal took place in Florida. It included some co-conspirators. I don't even know if they were named. There's some stuff that's come up to the Supreme Court, I believe, actually through Maxwell, his girlfriend, that just looks like it doesn't pass the smell test from a legal perspective. So in that sense, I'm happy to see that she's going to look into it, and also that she's right on board with what the president said. He's called for this investigation. He's the most really transparent president we've had. I can't even remember when, answering press's questions nonstop and wanting to get information out to the American people. And I'm glad to see she's on board. And to Reagan's last point, she brought up how there was maybe this pushback from the Trump base over how the Epstein files were handled originally. I think the mainstream media had a lot to do trying to create a narrative that there was some sort of fracture between individuals in the administration, whether it was Pam Bondi, whether it was FBI Director Kash Patel. Obviously, all that has smoothed over, or there never was anything. They're all still in their posts. The president trusts them. And maybe that's something Democrats are trying to recreate. That's my thoughts in terms of why this is resurrected right after the shutdown and their falling numbers in the polls there.
Yeah, well, we're trying to do a little jazz hands. Like, don't look at how bad, we were at handling the government shutdown by the Democrats, right? They want us to look over here at this one. I think that's a lot of what this is about. The thing is, if you're just an average person in the middle of America who's just trying to go to work every day, trying not to pay excessive money in taxes, trying to, raise a family and do all those things, you really think anybody cares about this stuff? No, you know what? We've got peace in the Middle East. We have 8 conflicts around the world that have been solved. We have a secure southern border. We have gas prices under $3 for the first time in a long time. We have things trending in the right direction, investment in America. We have people getting better paying jobs and a president who's actually paying attention to things that are going to matter to people. No one cares about this, but fine. Let's get it all out there and then let's move on. What's really funny, just before we get off of this Epstein stuff, is that back whenever it was, several months ago, when all of this stuff started bubbling up and they were trying to sabotage the Republican Party and get everybody at odds with each other. But anyway, it just shows you how kind of bloodthirsty these people are. And these people are crazy. But let's get it done. Let's get it out there. And then let's move on, because we have really serious stuff to talk about, like the possibility that we could have to call someone Governor Swalwell. That's right. Eric Swalwell thinks that he is going, potentially, the rumors are that he's going to run for president. Reagan, I don't know. This guy doesn't seem like the best pick, although you do have to look at the fact that Katie Porter dug herself a really deep hole, who was kind of the front runner for the Democrats to run for governor of California. This is a state that needs help. You need competence. You need someone who gets it, who is not part of the woke left, and none of the people are done out there, I think. I continue to say that I believe the next governor of California will be a Republican, because I think there are a lot of people out there who, look, it's the state with the most registered Republicans. It's the state where we fundraised the most and sold the most merchandise from the Trump campaign. State of California, it's a big state. There are a lot of Republicans there who I think are still hanging on and holding out hope that the right thing happens. But Eric Swalwell says he might throw his hat in the ring. That's the rumor out there. Reagan, how do you think that would play for the people of California? What do you think?
Oh boy, I'm not sure if this topic is any more serious than the last topic, but California is a beautiful state. I love San Diego. I interned down there and lived there for a couple of months, and it's hurts me to say this, but maybe for the GOP, watching California burn in the hands of Democrats isn't such a bad thing. Yeah. Maybe it could be a very similar situation to New York City. You have a country or a state and a city that could be in control of 2 crazy Democrats who are running these areas into the ground. And, I think President Trump made a really interesting point whenever he was asked about Mamdani, to the point where I was like, does President Trump think Mamdani should win? Because he would say that he thought it could be a benefit, it could be a good win for the GOP to have someone who's crazy in office, to really be like, this is what you could have, or you could come over here, you could vote for the GOP, and everything could be normal, everything could be calm. And so, I don't know, maybe that's a strategy with California. Should Republicans even waste their time running a good candidate in California? I'm not sure, but I think that's definitely something to consider.
Well, let me just remind everyone for a moment about Eric Swalwell. Don't forget about Fang Fang. That was his girlfriend who worked as a fundraiser for his campaign in 2014. She also helped place an intern in his office and, of course, was also working for China and their government. So you tell me how that's going to work out. That probably wasn't a perfect situation. She was a spy. That's right. He currently has potential mortgage fraud charges coming his way. There was a probe launched by, or the DOJ, I guess, is considering opening a probe. Federal Housing Agency Director Bill Pulte sent Attorney General Pam Bondi a letter accusing Swalwell of making false or misleading statements on loan documents. So this is a mortgage fraud charge potentially coming his way, which could be a problem for him. And we also shouldn't forget that this is an individual, Alex, who was one of the top promoters of the Russia collusion hoax against Donald Trump. And that wasn't just against Donald Trump. That hurt the entire country. We had tens of millions of dollars that went into, the investigation into the Russia collusion hoax to only find out that, it was all trash from the beginning. There was only one campaign that actually colluded with Russia. That was the Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton knew from the beginning, there's emails to prove it, that this was the goal, to tie Donald Trump somehow to Russia, to destroy his campaign, to destroy him personally, to potentially destroy, and as my husband points out all the time, his marriage. Imagine being Melania and hearing all this crazy stuff that they tried to accuse him of going on in Russia, which was all fake and all false from the beginning. Eric Swalwell, along with Adam Schiff, they were kind of the two that continued to push this trash out there to America. So let's make sure Californians remember that should Swalwell throw his hat in the ring for governor, because I don't think they want any part of that.
Well, he doesn't have good judgment. He was wrong about Russia. He was wrong about Fang Fang, right? So that was not a good pick. I guess beyond the mortgage fraud situation, which I have to note, Letitia James, James Comey, how many of these people, these Democrats, came out about your father-in-law and said no one is above the law.
Amazing.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the best thing about this is that a lot of this has to do with mortgage issues, and I just want to say those that live in glass houses, right, should never throw stones. So it seems like, possibility here with his trying to get a deal with his primary residence in Washington, D.C. I guess the interest rates are lower when you do primary residences. Ironically, I looked at the requirements to run for governor in California, and you have to be a resident, but it doesn't say anything about housing, which I'm like, that just makes no sense. Maybe Californians want to hurry up and push some sort of legislation through requiring that you need to live there to run, have your primary residence there. And then I just also have to note, there looks like there could be tax issues too, and he still has this January 6th lawsuit because he has an Obama judge overseeing it that's still pending. And I went and looked at the docket. It's suing your father-in-law and others in their personal capacities for things like emotional infliction of emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional distress, stuff like that a lot of courts are like, okay. So anyways, of course it's being entertained in Washington, D.C. because it's an Obama judge. I went in and looked at the docket. It's like every month they have a little status hearing. And it's like, this is just not going to go away, right? I mean, it's just, the courts are now the new political battleground. It's sad. My last thought is that I would love to I don't really watch governor debates really, but I think I'm going to have to watch if Katie Porter and Swalwell are next to each other on stage, because I cannot wait for her to yell at him to get out of her shot, right? Get out of her effing shot. That will be pure entertainment. I actually think, to be sincere, we should start praying for the people of California.
Well, they're just such bad options out there, at least on the Democrat side. I mean, I am excited to see more information given on the Republicans who are running, and maybe they're not all officially in it yet. But I mean, Katie Porter seems like one of the most vile human beings I've ever met. She's physically and just personality-wise, it's all bad. I don't know what she's offering to people. I'm shocked she was elected to any office ever. But if you really want to get people to vote for you, you have to have a little charisma. You have to have a little bit of just something to get. I don't know what she's got. Very little. Just to go back quickly to this mortgage fraud, the potential mortgage fraud. Apparently, it's very easy. It's very cut and dry. Either you sign documents to say your primary residence was in one place, or you didn't. So if there's a signed document by Eric Swalwell, Letitia James, whoever it is who has these mortgage fraud charges against them, very cut and dry. So there should be no wavering on anything. I think it should be pretty obvious to a court that that's what's going on. But yeah, let's pray for the people of California. Let's give them just a big prayers up, because it is one of the most beautiful states. I'm on the way out to California after this. I'm headed out there tonight, and I'm going to be out there for 2 days for a variety of different things. And every time I go out there, I think the same thing. I'm like, God, this is one of the greatest places in America. It's beautiful. It's got so much to offer. Mm-hmm. Can we just get it sane? Can we just make it a little more normal and just, I don't know, bring the gas prices down and do things, like not taking children away from their families if you don't allow them to identify as a furry or something nuts. Like, we just want the basics back there. So I'm going to hope for the best. I'll tell you where, unfortunately, we're not getting the best is in Chicago. The Chicago public school system, it's a disaster. I mean, imagine having to live with a governor and a mayor there in Chicago who doesn't seem to really care about the residents, who's put, of course, illegal aliens ahead of you. But listen to this one. Between 2021 and 2024, Chicago Public Schools increased the spending of taxpayer funds to the tune of millions of dollars on things such as so-called professional development. And I tell you what, Reagan, we got to put those in air quotes, because it was at resort spas, luxury hotels, and overseas destinations. Listen to how much the spending went up, from around $300,000 spent in fiscal year 21 to $7.7 million in fiscal year 2024. So we're talking about trips, staff trips to places like Finland, Estonia, Egypt, and South Africa, as well as optional tourist activities of debatable value, including a visit to a South African game park, a hot air balloon ride, camel rides, and a visit to a bazaar. How the hell, Reagan, is any of that helping the children of Chicago public schools? Because when you look at the numbers and you look at how our schools, especially the public school system, is failing American kids, these people ought to be ashamed of themselves. That is outrageous.
Yeah, Chicago Public Schools has been a mess for a while. Before I covered the White House, I actually covered education, and it was this peak time where after the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody was freaking out about what was in schools. The schools were now in the kitchen and in the living room, and parents were getting a glimpse inside the classroom and seeing what was going on in their kids' classrooms. And so Chicago Public Schools is one of those schools that comes to mind, and I just groan. I know how much this district has been through and how they really have not made any improvements or any fixes. And this right here, this issue of education and the classrooms is still something that I think the Republicans have an opportunity to capitalize on. Yes, men are not in women's sports anymore. Yes, men can't go into women's locker rooms and bathrooms. And yes, gender ideology and critical race theory lessons have been rooted out from most classrooms. But that doesn't mean there isn't stuff that needs fixing in the classrooms. And I think that is an issue that is so near and dear to so many Americans' hearts, and is also just a great issue for the GOP to capitalize on, because I don't think you're going to see Democrats pretend to paint themselves as a pro-family, pro-kid party. And so this right here is just an example of how education is still dire in America. Kids are still reeling from the pandemic and being sent home and locked up. And so it just breaks my heart to hear Chicago Public Schools still has not changed.
Alex, these people don't care at all about the kids. They're spending $7.7 million on trips to a bazaar, camel rides, trip to Finland. What does that have to do
Laura,
with helping our students?
Yeah, this upset me. My mom was a school teacher for almost 50 years. I went to public school growing up, going to public school. There is so many problems with the numbers you read through. Okay, there should be a DOJ investigation into who is handling this from those years, 2021, when it was 0.3 million was spent on this teacher development or whatnot, and then all the way, like you said, it went up to like 7.7. In the true turn, I think, was from the 0.3. The next year was 3.4. They got away with it. So what they do, the following year, they more than doubled it, right? So they need to go through and do a proper accounting. 13 of those 15 overseas trips that you mentioned were not quote unquote approved from the reporting I read. Well then, who's the leadership? How are they able to go if they weren't approved? There's so many questions to this story, or to what's come out now. And this is why we really need like Doge in these major cities, especially these major blue cities, to account for this kind of thing. The true people who are robbed here are the children. I went and looked at how Chicago public schools do. No surprise, it's not very well. 30% of 3rd grade to 8th grade, 30% meet state standards for reading and math. How sad is that? And their teachers, their teacher development, their superintendents, or whoever it is, are worried about going to Egypt and going on travel tours with the money that should be used to better educate these children. It is terrible. It's actually criminal. And there needs to be some sort of investigation into this. The last thing I'll say is even Google AI, which I never really trust, I Googled a little bit about the COVID relief program, and it said, quote, biggest fraud in a generation. And I thought, wow, that says something. It has been just truly taken advantage of, and the Chicago public schools are a prime example.
Yeah, when you look at things like this, it just makes my blood boil. This is one of the reasons the president wants to eliminate the Department of Education. He wants to put Linda McMahon, our education secretary, out of a job. He said that from the very beginning. She has said that she hopes to be out of a job. The teachers' unions allow bad teachers to stay in jobs despite them not caring at all about the kids, about educating our kids. The number that only 30% of whatever it is, like 1st to 8th graders are reading at state level proficiency is outrageous. When you look across the country, though, it's also a problem. You have 22% of 12th graders who score at or above proficiency in math testing. 35% are reading at proficiency for their grade level. That's across the country, guys. This is crazy. We're in America and we want to be number one for everything. But whenever they did a study of 15-year-olds and saw how they stacked up against other developed nations, there were 81 countries that were involved in this. We came in number 28th, our 15-year-olds. We got to do something. We've got to get the bad teachers out. We got to get the bad superintendents out. Apparently, the person who was supposedly in charge of all of this no longer is in that position. There's a new person in that position. Well, we ought to bring the old person back and do a big questioning of how all that money was spent. And we got to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our kids. Yeah, they got behind in COVID. We could catch them up, but we have to start actually teaching our kids the real stuff, things that are going to prepare them for life. Let's get them back to proficiency in reading and math, but then let's also teach them, what a mortgage is and how to live life whenever they get out of school, because I feel like none of these kids are taught basics anymore, and they don't know how to do anything. They're given a puppy and a safe space, and that's not real life. As Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. When you get out in the real world, you get punched in the face. We better start preparing our kids for stuff. Sorry, I get really heated on this because to me, there is nothing more important than ensuring that our future generations are prepared. And right now they're not. And it's our fault. And so this president has said he wants to tackle it. I think you're right, Alex. I think you're the one who said it. This is something, or maybe it was you, Reagan. This is something that Republicans absolutely should own. We should run with this and we should fix it. And then we can look at the Democrats and we can look at all these lunatics who spent $7 million of Chicago taxpayer money on trips to Egypt and say, a shame on you guys. You guys let this happen. We came in and fixed it. And hopefully people want to see more of things like that happen. All right. Reagan and Alex, that's all the time we're going to have today. You guys are both awesome. I appreciate you both for spending some time with us here. To everybody at home, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View. And I won't back down.